243 Winchester. Is there a better whitetail deer hunting cartridge? I'm going to make a case that this is the whitetail hunting cartridge. Like so many of you, the very first hunting cartridge I ever got as a teenager was this one, the 243 Winchester. It was my mule deer cartridge, and it served me very well. The bullet of choice that I used was a 95 grain partition, going around 3,100 feet per second. It's a deadly combo. In 1952, Winchester introduced one of the most popular, most infamous, legendary cartridges ever made, the 308 Winchester. And it didn't take long for wildcatters to neck up and neck down the 308 Winchester. One that became extremely popular with wildcatters was the 243 Winchester. So 3 years later, after the 308, Winchester introduced the 243 Winchester. And something they did that really set them apart in the 6mm category was they provided a 1 in 10 twist in their rifles. The biggest competitor to the 243 Winchester at the time was the 6mm Remington. And the 6mm Remington, a bit faster than this. The parent case to the 6mm Remington is the 257 Roberts, which is just a neck down 7mm Mauser. But there was only one problem with the 6mm Remington. It came with a slower twist rate. Remington had no plans to make their 6mm Remington a versatile cartridge that you could hunt varmint and deer with. But Winchester was smart enough to realize that with heavier bullets, this could be the ideal deer cartridge. So the 243 can shoot up to a 100 grain bullet in a 1 in 10 twist. 6mm Remington couldn't. And by the time Remington realized their mistake and put faster twist rifles for the 6mm Remington, it was too late. This is the most popular 6mm cartridge in America, and even today it still holds its crown. Not even the 6mm Creedmoor can beat it right now in popularity. What makes the 243 so popular? Why do hunters just gravitate towards it, especially for a beginning cartridge? Well, here's what I gotta say. If you are back east and you're really just hunting whitetail deer, maybe doing some woodchuck hunting, you have a really strong case that 243 Winchester can do everything you need it to do. So let me show you the numbers for the 243. We're going to start with a 55 grain bullet. So this is definitely a varmint load. And what makes this awesome is just how fast it is. You're almost pushing 4,000 feet per second with a 55 grain bullet. That's really great. Also, no recoil to the 243 Winchester. And then a 70 grain bullet at 3,600. An 80 grain, mid 34. This is where we start getting into a deer load, 85, 90 grain bullets going mid 3,200 feet per second. And then with what a lot of deer hunters use is 95, 100 grain. Again, I started out with a 95 grain partition at like 3,100 feet per second. And again, you can get mid 3,100 with a 100 grain bullet. What you have is a very viable deer load that's extremely flat shooting with very little recoil. Let's take a look at the ballistic chart. We're going to use a deer bullet. I'm going to use a 90 grain AccuBond with a BC of 0.376, a muzzle velocity of 3,200 feet per second. Your energy is right a little over 2,000 foot-pounds of energy. And check out that recoil. There just isn't much recoil at all. That's what makes this so awesome. Now, since we are using a bonded bullet, we've got to keep the velocity of the impact in mind, so it is going to limit us a little bit, I think, using an AccuBond. But out to, well, I would probably put the limits of solid expansion and energy. Experts say you want to keep your energy above 1,000 foot-pounds for deer, but we're looking at 2456 at 300, 1,206 foot-pounds of energy, 9.9 inches of drop when you zero it at 100. This is extremely flat shooting, even out to 400 yards. You know, you're still going to get the bullet to expand, and you're a little bit below 1,000 foot-pounds. But 23 inches of drop. This is kind of like a short Magnum. It definitely has Magnum performance, and you can see why, especially back east, when your shots are all within 100, maybe 200 yards, this thing is very potent. Now I want to compare the 243 Winchester to other popular varmint cartridges. I want to see how the 243 stacks up to the competition. And we're going to use a 32 grain at 4,200 feet per second. Energy, this doesn't really matter, but let's see, out to 200 yards, bullets going basically 3,100 feet per second, 683 foot-pounds at 400. Honestly, I think 400 is a little too far for a 204 Ruger. As you can see, bullets still going plenty fast enough to expand, especially with a varmint bullet. Check out that energy, 353. I want to take a look at these two numbers. The first one is in drop, that's 15.8 inches. And then the second one is wind in inches. This is with a 10 mile per hour wind at 400 yards, 19.3. Not great. Now let's look at the standard for varmint cartridges, the 22-250 Remington with a 40 grain at 4,300 feet per second. Energy, 1,643 foot-pounds at 200 yards. You're down to 934 foot-pounds at 400. Bullets going 2,400 feet per second and a little over 500 foot-pounds of energy. And it's a little bit better in the drop category, with 14.1 compared to 15.8, and a little over 2 inches better with wind drift. Still not great with these stubby little varmint bullets. And finally, let's get to the 243 Winchester with the 55 grain at 4,000 feet per second. Your energy is 1,954 foot-pounds, and then at 200, 1,241 foot-pounds. At 400, the bullet's going 2,509 and 769 foot-pounds. And then the drop, it's right in between a 22-250 Remington and a 204 Ruger at 14.9 inches. But look how much better in wind drift. With this heavier bullet with a tad bit higher BC, you are 3 inches better than a 22-250 Remington and 5 inches better than a 204 Ruger. I've got to say, between at least the three that I compared, 204 Ruger, 22-250, and 243, if you want a one-and-done solution and the biggest game you're going to be shooting is deer, yeah, I'd say you got to go with 243 Winchester. It is very competitive as a varmint cartridge to these popular options, but you also have the ability to shoot up to a 100 grain bullet, and it is a darn good deer cartridge option. Now, I know what you're going to say. The newer cartridges, whether it's a 22 Creed, 22 ARC, 6mm ARC, 6mm Creedmoor, yeah, they might be able to outshine the 243 Winchester. But this old classic is still extremely viable. Let me just say one more thing about the 243 Winchester. Like the 270 Winchester, like the 7mm Remington Magnum, the 243 Winchester is not going to go down without a big fight. What do I mean by that? Well, you can now get fast twist 243 Winchester rifles. I know Weatherby makes them with like a 1-in-7 twist. So you'll be able to shoot 115, 120 grain bullets in a 243 Winchester with the highest BC. And just so you know, the 243 Winchester does have a bigger case capacity than the 6mm Creedmoor. So if you do get that fast twist 243, you're really set.